Hey everyone, we're here again to continue through the book of Genesis, and today we're recapping some things from Genesis chapter 7, 8, and 9. And so what we're going to do is we're going to hit a few little things that we're not going to have a lot of time to go into extreme detail in the message this Sunday. So first thing we're going to look at is the ark. In verse 7, chapter 7, we start getting a little more details about the ark, and we get those in chapter 6 and all those type of things, and give you an idea before we get into the details of who's going on the ark, how long they're going to be on the ark. Let's recap how big the ark is. So first of all, let's remember that the ark is about 510 feet long. It's just a football field and a half. All right, it's about 50 feet high and about 85 feet wide. So it's pretty big. It's large, and so it's not some little rinky-dink boat. This is a massive ship. It's equivalent to a lot of our cargo ships that we have today that cross the Atlantic and the Pacific. So it's a very large ship. And so you have this very large ship, and then beginning in chapter 7 it says, in verse 1, then the Lord said to Noah, enter the ark, you and all your household, for I have seen that you alone are righteous before me in this generation. So he calls Noah to enter the ark, and he enters the ark with some animals. All right. One, he enters in with one pair, a male and a female of every type of animal. But with the clean animals and the birds, he says 7 pairs. So 7 sets of males and females. Now, side note, when he's loading the ark here, he would not have loaded older, fully grown animals. You got to think, after the flood, they got to repopulate. So these would have been very young animals. So think about, your elephants, your giraffes, these large animals. They would have been the very young, maybe like a year or 2 old offspring. That's it. It wouldn't have been fully grown, well in age, because they needed to replenish the earth. And so you would have had the little baby tigers, little tigers, not the fully grown ones. You wouldn't have had, you had the ones that are just weaned off their mothers, is what the type of animals you would have had on the ark. The alligators would have been this big. Not this big, they'd have been this big, So that gives you kind of an idea there. Roughly, that puts they say about 1,400 animals on the ark based on their kinds. And that's another thing that we were learning on Wednesday nights, going through the Ken Ham study and the Answers in Genesis research and all those things about the ark and the animals going on. They'd have been according to their kinds that would come on to the boat. So it would have been every version of the dog out there. It would have been one pair of dogs, and from that one set of dogs, we'd have got all the variety of dogs we have today. Just like it would have had tigers and lions and cheetahs and house cat. There would have been one set of cat, and it would have produced all the cats we have. All right, so when you see the little depictions of Noah's Ark and you got 4 different types of dogs, you got tigers and lions and all those things, not exactly accurate. When you read the Bible, it says he did them just according to their kind. So it would have been one feline, one dog set, one elephant kind, one giraffe kind. There wouldn't have been the Asian elephant and the African elephant. It would have just been one kind. It would have been grizzly bears and brown bears and black bears and panda bears. It would have been just one kind. And so you need to keep that in mind. So there have been roughly, 1,500 animals or so on the ark, which the ark, remember, 510 feet long, it's 50 feet high, 85 feet wide, 3 levels in it, plenty big enough to hold that many animals. Again, because the animals were young, just weaned off their parents, that have been younger, not the fully grown, because they had to repopulate the earth. So that's the size of the ark. That's who's been called on, Noah and his family. That's, he's got his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives. So you got 8 people, roughly 1,500 animals that are coming onto the ark there, according to their kinds, and there's pairs, but there's 7 pairs of the clean ones. Why? Because we'll see later, when they come off the ark, they make sacrifices to the Lord. And so we see that patterned after the sacrifice that God did in Genesis chapter 3, when it says that he made the clothes of skin for Adam and Eve. And he set up that pattern. We saw Abel, who was faithful in his sacrifice to the Lord because he gave a blood offering. He sacrificed a lamb. And so we're going to see after the flood, we're going to see Noah make an altar and do sacrifices. That's why they had to have 7 pairs, because if you have 2 sheep only and you do a sacrifice, that's the end of the sheep forever. So 7 pairs, so they keep having sheep, but also do the sacrifices that the Lord would have them do. And so that's why that. So what we're going to focus on for the rest of our time in this video, though, is the duration of the flood. All right, most of us know, hey, it rained 40 days and 40 nights. But how long was Noah, his family, and the animals actually on the ark? Well, when you read through chapters 7 and 8 specifically, you will see that about 370 days they were on the ark. They were in the ark about 370 days. All right, so we're going to kind of recap that. First, we read that it rained 40 days and 40 nights. We see that in chapter 7, verse 11, and it just rained 40 days and 40 nights. But we also see later that in chapter 7 that it was for 150 days. Well, how do we know that? They start giving the months. It started raining here on the second month, the 17th day of the month, and then later it says the seventh month on the 17th day of the month. It's it all kind of stopped, and God sent the wind. And so we see it rained 40 days and 40 nights. The water's up above the mountains for an additional 110 days. And so for 150 days, the earth is covered in water. And then God sends a wind, and it starts receding. And so we see 74 days later that the mountains become visible. We see this because it says on the 10th month, the first day of the month. So in the 7th month of the 17th day of the month, God sent a wind. On the 10th month, the first day of the month, we see that mountains become visible. And then we see on the 11th month, the 11th day of the month, which is after 40 more days, we see he sends a raven out, but the raven comes back. And so we see in 7 days later, he sends out a dove, and it comes back. And then 7 days later, he sends out another dove, comes back. And then 7 days later again, he sends out a dove, and it doesn't come back. And then it says, so that's the 12th month, and the second day of the month, he sends out that third dove. And we see that in Genesis 8:12. And then we see on the 601st year of Noah's life, first month of the first day of the month, all right, which is about 29 days later from when the dove didn't come back, where he sent the dove out. 29 days later, we see that he begins to see the ground, and it's still wet. All right, but he says they can start to see that the ground at the surface of the earth is beginning to dry. So I imagine at this point, he looks out the ark, he sees the ground and all that kind of stuff, but it's still maybe a little bit muddy. You still probably see streams of water running off and all these type of things. But hey, we're seeing progress. And then it says in the second month of the 27th day of the month, so you have the first day, the first month, it looks like it's drying out. And then about 56 days later, it says here on the second month of the 27th day of the month, he left the ark and he came out. And we see that in chapter 8. And so you see this progression here. When you add up all these days, you're looking at all these days, it comes to roughly 370 days in the ark. The reason we say roughly is because it depends on how they count months. They followed the lunar calendar, so some months had 30 days, some months had 29. So there's a little bit of debate. Was it 360 days? Was it 385 days? Was it around 370? So 370 is a good guess because it's just given the months there, but it's not given the exact numbers. It's just given days and months. So that's what we have. And so you see that, all the different months and days that are given. And God gave those for very specific reasons so that we can know when things happened. He wanted you to realize that this was a literal event that happened. That's why he gives so much details on the third month, on the 27th day of the month, on the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, on the 10th month, the first day of the month, on the 11th month, the 11th day of the month, on the 11th month, 18th day, 11th month, 25th day, 12th month, second day. And it says in the first month, on the first day, in the second month, on the 27th day. Again, he's repeating all these dates because he wants you to know this was a literal event that literally happened. All right? And that sets us up for the rest of the Bible. When God speaks and puts it in his word, these things are to be taken as history. Genesis 1 through 11 is a history book. It's revealing to us how God established the universe, why he established the universe, what the problem of the universe is, that is sin, and how God views sin, but how he also provides a way of atonement. And ultimately, he is pointing us all to Jesus. And throughout this flood narrative, which we talked about on Sunday. If you want to go back and see more about that, you can go back to our sermon on Sunday from Genesis chapter 6, and you can get more details about how that points us to Christ. But Genesis 7 through 9, I know reading all those dates and reading all those numbers and all that kind of stuff can be taxing sometimes, but it just reminds us that God is very specific. And when he is very specific, he wants us to pay attention. And what he's wanting you to pay attention to is the fact that this is a literal flood that literally happened on the earth. God's judgment on sin is literal. He will literally judge and punish sin. And there is a time coming we'll all stand before the throne of God. And we'll be divided into two groups. Those that are in Christ and those outside of Christ. Just like in the days of Noah, there was those that were inside the boat and those outside the boat. Those in the boat were protected and safe and secure and survived, but those outside the boat perished. Well, those outside of Christ are going to perish into the lake of fire, in which they will experience the wrath and the judgment of God for all eternity. But those that are in Christ will be saved from the wrath of God, and they will experience God's love and grace for all eternity in his presence. And so I encourage you, read through Genesis 7 through 9. Enjoy those details because God has given those details to you for a reason. Hope you have a great day, and I look forward to worshiping with you on Sunday.